Oh my goodness. We're back at it. The Beer Man and Joe Willie. Crack 'em. We're mid-beer and into...
Not even lunch yet.
Not lunch. It's lunch somewhere.
So lunch somewhere. Not here.
It's lunch somewhere, and we're talking about the Heisman Trophy. This is a special episode, the Heisman Trophy. Now, in Division II, where we come from, it's called the Harlan Hill Award, and Joik Bell, our very own Wayne State Warrior, won that before he went to the Detroit Lions. Do you think Joik Bell is a better Wayne State representative than Tom Beer as a Detroit Lion? I think Tom Beer playing fullback and linebacker, being the last two-way man potentially in the NFL, I think that holds a candle over Joik's performance as a Lion, even though he was more productive maybe.
I don't think so. I think Joik was a much better player than I ever was in college, and that's a fact. And he was a much better NFL player than I was. He started at running back.
He could have gone pro as a sophomore, I swear to God. He was as good a sophomore as he was as a senior.
Yeah.
Should have won the Harlan Hill his sophomore year, but we digress. All right. We're not going to play to too many fans if we talk about the Harlan Hill Award in Division II football.
Correct.
The Heisman Trophy, though, is upon us for the 2024-2025 season. And with the portal and with the NIL deals, it has become more and more complicated. Guys who you thought were going to be wearing a jersey for 4 years, right, and going off into the sunset, are now wearing multiple jerseys. I mean, we saw this a few years ago with Jalen Hurts, where he was a great player at Alabama, led them to the promised land, and then switched over to Oklahoma. We've seen this with a number of players, but now it's almost like one or two teams in every conference has a brand new guy who's at the top of the list.
Yeah, well, look at Dylan Gabriel. Started off at Central Florida, was great at Central Florida. Then where did he go in the middle? He went to
Oklahoma Sooners. Yeah.
Oklahoma. Now he ends up at Oregon. It's just hard to wrap my head around this sometimes, but it is what it is. We're in the NIL version of football.
We're in the portal era, and Gabriel at Oregon with a stacked team is going to be a front runner for sure.
I think he's going to run into the same problem I thought of as his team will. It's going to be a tough conference.
Going into the Big Ten.
Going to the Big Ten, I think, is going to be tough. I'm not saying they're not going to win, but I think they're going to have one or two losses.
It's not the Big Ten, right? It's like the Big 18 or 19 or 27. The Big 27 is a little bit different animal. You definitely have to play a more physical brand of football. You're going to be in close games where your defense has to carry you, and that is nothing like the Pac-12.
No. It's kind of reminds me of a run and shoot a little bit, the Pac-12. I mean, they do run the football, but it's more West Coast offense than it is than the Big Ten.
Yeah, and you go into Iowa. I mean,
yeah, you got to go into Wisconsin.
Iowa, the frustrating thing about some of these teams, Iowa, Wisconsin, etc., they're going to take possessions away from you with the way they manage the clock. Sure. And that frustrates teams that want to get out there, just like you said, the run and shoot, right? The wide open offenses, they get frustrated, and then it brings down your statistical value. So we also have to think about stats when you think about the Heisman Trophy, right? All these guys are trying to put the big numbers up. They want to win, obviously, because that's where a lot of these dollars stem from, the fact that you're a winner and an All-American. And that kind of lands me with the next guy, and that's Quinn Ewers. Right. As an Oklahoma fan, it obviously hurts me to be extolling the wonderful pieces of the puzzle that Quinn Ewers brings to the Texas Longhorns puzzle. But this kid's a winner. I mean, you watch him, and Arch Manning is sitting behind him, the heir apparent. But that Arch Manning can learn a lot from watching the way Quinn Ewers leads a football team.
We've got a list that we're looking of all the players. And I think if it's not a team that's at least 9-2 or only has 2 losses, you're not going to win the Heisman.
Yeah.
Right? You're not going to have a 6-5 team or let's say Missouri, right, goes 7-3. Doesn't matter how good the quarterback is. If you're not in the top 4, I don't think you're going to win the Heisman.
Yeah, you have to do something stupid at this point, like break an all-time record for rushing or passing to even get in the conversation if you're not in one of these top programs.
Yeah, and that's why I love Carson Beck. I think he played great last year. He's got a great offensive line. He's got a great defense. They plug and play on the offensive line, 330-pound tackles. And I think he's going to have a great year. I think Georgia's going to be really tough to beat.
Yeah, the other kid who comes into a very nice spot, transferring from Kansas State, is Will Howard for Ohio State. Also, the transfer from Ole Miss, the running back, Quinshon Judkins, comes into Ohio State, sitting right there alongside Travion Henderson. So they're going to split carries. So forget the running back position there. You got Jalen Milroe at Alabama. Obviously, they didn't get much worse, even with Nick Saban leaving. They plug in Kalen DeBoer. He's a very good football coach. They got some of those offensive linemen that looked like we're going to leave in the portal, came back to Alabama. Okay. So I think Alabama's just fine. And then if you believe that Miami is the team coming out of the ACC, then you got Cam Ward transferring over from Washington State. All these transfers that are going to be at the top of the Heisman list.
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough to pick. I really love Shedeur Sanders in Colorado, and I love Travis Hunter in Colorado. But they don't have the hogs up front. They don't have the big offensive linemen and the big defensive linemen to compete.
I mentioned this. I love the experiments that are happening, though. We mentioned Ryan Day in the Ohio State Booster Club is going to try to buy a national championship. We'll see. It might work.
Yeah.
Similarly, when it comes to the portal, Deion Sanders just reset he took a few key pieces and then reset his entire lineup. Is it going to work? Right? I talked earlier about the Washington Huskies. Took the whole Arizona team with them. Every good player came from Arizona and reset Washington's lineup. Do these resets work? Is the portal and is the NIL money actually enough to completely rewrite the script?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look at Deion Sanders. I think he came in and what did he tell? 40 or 50 players? He sent them a letter. Said, you're released. You're gone.
Yeah.
Just don't. You can't play here.
Thanks for playing.
Thanks for playing. It was nice having you. Go find another. And they all went in the portal. So
I agree with you, though. Carson Beck was a natural recruit at Georgia. Kirby Smart's got a great thing going there. That's a machine. Lane Kiffin is the perfect coach to have Jackson Dart in position to upset the Heisman race. And then you got the 6th, 7-year senior, the 25-year-old Cam Rising out at Utah. Utah is going to be very, very good. They're not going to have a strong schedule. He's going to be able to put up some gaudy stats out in what's left of the Big 12. But my favorite guy out of this mix is Cam Ward. I loved watching him play at Washington State. Now he moves into playing for Mario Cristobal at Miami. And Miami has nothing but upside with having to go through Clemson and Florida State and not much else in that conference.
Yeah. All good points, Joe. Trying to find somebody else that I would actually think has a chance to win the Heisman. Maybe Jackson Arnold from Oklahoma. Good defense, love to run the football, tough conference.
You're right, though. They might just let him loose.
Yeah, maybe.
I think the same thing about the kid at Tennessee, Nico, who nobody can pronounce his last name.
Yeah.
Ilalaiamia.
Yeah.
Josh Heupel, perfect guy to be coaching a kid like that. Nussmeier at LSU is a very, very strong quarterback. Klubnik is the kid with Dabo Sweeney's got in Clemson. So if Clemson can make the run, I mean, there's some dynamite football players in the mix here. Grayson McCall is the one that's probably the dark horse. He was the All-American, multiple O'Brien nominee, was in all the lists as a quarterback at Coastal Carolina last year.
Yeah.
Now he goes to NC State. NC State's got a nice supporting cast around him. Can they make a run? Fafita is the kid who came out of nowhere for Arizona last year to crack them into the middle of the top 20. Anybody that sneaks their head out of this mix that we haven't talked about? I mean, what if Alex Orji explodes the Big Ten?
And I think he could. I think he's going to be really good. It's possible. I definitely think the Heisman winner definitely comes from one of the top 12, but I think he's in the top 4, one of the top 4. So, I mean, if you've got more than
that
two,
really narrows it down.
If you've got, well, it doesn't really. But if you got more than 2 losses, I think you're out. I don't care who you are. I think the Heisman winner is going to have 0 losses or 1. That's it.
I look at Utah's schedule, and this is why I like Cam Rising. I look at Utah's schedule.
They can get to the playoff undefeated, probably.
They're going to they go to Stillwater, Oklahoma, where they play Oklahoma State. That's the only tough game on their schedule.
Well,
that
that's
isn't
about one of the toughest places to play.
It is. It is a tough place to play. It always has been. That's the win that they've got to get. And then the Wisconsin kid, Van Dyke, who transferred from Miami to open up the spot for Cam Ward. Van Dyke in Wisconsin is going to be much better under Luke Fickell. Luther Burden is the back at Missouri. Does a kid sneak in here from the group of 5? Is there a Memphis Boise? Is McLeod, the quarterback from James Madison, who went over to Texas State, are they going to get enough TV to even be in the conversation?
No. Today is we call it new school way of playing football. And people that are on the TV, the eyes are on them. And if the eyes aren't on you, the eye in the sky doesn't lie.
You think he can get to New York, though? Can he be in the 4 that get to New York? How about Gabbert?
If one of these no.
Okay,
from the MAC,
you're not getting to New York.
The Heisman.
So if Gabbert goes undefeated at Miami of Ohio, and he's a top quarterback, Davey O'Brien nominee coming into the season, no matter how gaudy the stats are, a MAC quarterback's not getting into New York.
Have you watched the MAC?
Yeah, I have.
Have you watched it?
Yeah, because
it's pretty shitty football. It's,
at the low end or the middle end. The middle's not an end. At the low end or in the middle, it is not good. It is not great college football.
I saw
at the high end,
50 to 45. Like, I don't know. It wasn't as entertaining as watching a good football game, like Alabama versus Clemson, right? That's good football. When I watch the MAC, and obviously there's good players in the MAC. There's lots of guys that go to the NFL every year. But it's a notch down, in my opinion.
And it's a notch down, and maybe some of it is the television coverage, right? Like when you're in the stadium, you watch Ferris State play Grand Valley State. That's great. That's a great football game. Right. When Toledo plays Miami of Ohio, that's going to be a great football game.
That's a good point, because that MAC football is better than Division II football that we played. There's no question.
There's great football being played all over the place. It's how it's covered a lot of times.
Yeah.
And I mean, there is a speed factor, right? I mean, you get under the bright lights, with the hot turf, and the coverage is nice, and you get to
skill. Speed and skill. Correct.
One of the things that I really like about speed and skill that's going to enhance the Big Ten is the Oregon-Washington move in.
That'll be interesting to see how they play against, like you brought up, Iowa. How do they play at Iowa?
The clash of styles.
Or how do they play at Wisconsin, right? Or at Minnesota.
Right.
Dude, those are tough places to play. They're different. What do they play like when it's 20 degrees out? That's coming too. And it's not just the 100-degree days that's humid. You've got the cold of the winter.
You think that when you package all of these teams into categories, do you think that it's overrated to say, oh, well, they can win in any kind of condition? Because at the end of the day, the playoff and the championship is probably going to be in a dome in some big city stadium, right?
Where was the championship this year?
There's no more outdoor, you're going to have to grind it out. This year it's at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia.
Atlanta. Does it matter? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, does it really matter? I mean, yeah, you're going to have to grind out some games during the year, but aren't we trying to engineer a world of college football where it's pretty even and everybody's playing on the same I mean, are there stadiums left where it's really tough to play?
No, I don't think so. Is there a Division I college football stadium that isn't sold out?
And that's why I think,
every one is sold out.
Right. This Iowa mystique, Iowa's good because they put good defense on the field, and Kurt Ferentz is a hell of a football coach. It isn't because it's going into Iowa. They got the same kind of a stadium.
It can be. There can be a bit of a stigma. Like when we played in Philadelphia.
Hayden Fry isn't painting the locker room pink for the visitors anymore.
When we played in Philadelphia, playoff game, whatever year that was, 94 or 95. The team was waiting at midfield. Ricky Waters was their running back, and they were waiting at midfield to fight us before warm-ups, an hour before the game. And on top of that, we're walking out, and you can hear a bunch of, so the DBs went out first.
They were like,
you can hear the DBs saying, buckle up.
Come out and play.
They're throwing batteries at us that were that big.
The fans, not Ricky Waters.
Ting, ting, ting batteries as you're walking out. So you put your hands over your ears and just kind of put your head down.
You remember
now, does that affect you? Yeah, a little bit. And then we get out there and their team's at the 50-yard line wants to fight, and then half the guys in our team wanted to fight too, they're not afraid to, not afraid of anybody. You got your helmet on and stuff. It's not like you're really fighting football, throw each other around and stuff. But does it affect you? Yeah. You walk into a nasty stadium and they're throwing crap at you and they say things to you that you've never heard before.
Yeah.
It affects you.
So you think that there is a certain amount of intimidation for certain guys. Certain guys are going to use that to their advantage.
Sure,
they're going to amp it. But you do think there's some wilting flowers that might get a little bit intimidated.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Lions game the last week. They actually got a couple of offside penalties in a preseason game. That's unheard of.
Yeah.
They never get an offside penalty in a preseason game because of noise. There was a couple that came out. So, yeah, it affects you. It affects you, but nothing you can't overcome.
And that's another staple, right? I mean, like, it used to be that the Heisman Trophy had a leadership quality to it, right? You weren't just the best player statistically, but you had to kind of be the captain of your team. And I'm gonna give you the rewind button because it's local. A former Bloomfield Hills Cranbrook football player who went to West Point wins the Heisman Trophy in 1958. Pete Dawkins wins the Heisman Trophy in 1958. He's the last player in human history to be the captain of the Army football team, to be a brigadier general serving in the Vietnam War, to be a Rhodes Scholar, and to win the Heisman Trophy. So the human being of yesteryear that won the Heisman Trophy, now do you just have to be the best, have the most gaudy stats and pass the eye test?
So let's go to the opposite of what you have just described. Barry Sanders was in Japan and he fell asleep during the Heisman Trophy presentation.
Yeah.
So, wait.
I get it. I get it that it carves Johnny Manziel.
Johnny Manziel was probably doing a couple lines before he went out.
He probably had a bag of booger sugar and was
Did you see
ready.
that? Have you watched that interview?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. He was just off.
It's unbelievable.
He was just off the chain in every way.
But it's embarrassing too.
It's very embarrassing.
It's embarrassing.
It's embarrassing.
I mean,
you know what? It's embarrassing what he did in the NFL.
And it's embarrassing.
You can't get away with it.
It's also embarrassing that socially that people are walking around saying, oh, well, that's funny. For the people who made $100 million investments in him, it's not funny. It's pathetic, and it cost people some careers because he was such a shine box.
Yeah.
When I look at some of these guys, most recently, if I'm kind of carving up this, the one that kind of makes the most sense to me with Quinn Ewers and what I think the Texas Longhorns could do if they upset Michigan here. This episode might drop after that game, so just a heads up. He could have a Joe Burrow type season, a 2019 Joe Burrow type season. This Texas team is kind of prepped for that direction. If they run off that kind of a season, do you think they just give it to the quarterback? We've seen teams. We've seen the Gino Torettas, right? We've seen teams where the team is so damn good, they just give it to the quarterback.
If you go into Michigan and win, you deserve all the accolades that you're going to have coming to you. So, I mean, that it'll pretty much decide not their whole season, but a good portion of their season will be decided when they play Michigan.
Can the Texas Longhorns beat Michigan non-conference?
Hell no.
And run the table in the SEC?
I mean, no. I shouldn't say hell no, but no. I don't think so. I don't think so.
Too tall an order coming into the season.
Yeah, and you got to have too many things go right. I think that you're playing against a stacked team in Michigan that has the backups could start for most other college teams.
So who wins it?
I'm going to go with Carson Beck from Georgia.
And does Georgia win the national championship?
Yes, I think they do. And
whoa. You picked somebody else.
No, I didn't.
Now you're picking Georgia?
No, I didn't.
You had Ole Miss Michigan.
Oh, maybe I did. I picked Ole Miss. Ole Miss.
So Carson Beck gets into the
I
Final
like Carson
Four.
Beck. I mean, I really like Jackson Dart because I think that they're going to win and they're going to win huge. Just from what I've heard from the transfer portal, the players that they've got that are filling, because they've got great skill position players, receivers. Well, DB.
We both suffer from PTSD from concussions in college. So sifting through the Tom Beer concussion protocols, do you think Georgia gets into the 4 and Ole Miss beats them, and then Carson Beck wins the Heisman Trophy, or do you actually think Georgia's going to get into the game and Carson Beck's going to win the Heisman Trophy?
Who knows? I mean, it just depends. Obviously, they're going to.
Well, that's Texas. So Texas wins early.
Yes.
Yeah. We go from Quinn Ewers to Jackson Dart. You got Quinn Ewers. I think Quinn Ewers is the favorite. He's my favorite. I think he's going to be my pick. I think Texas makes the Final Four, but I don't think he makes the final game. I think he gets beat.
You think Texas makes the Final Four and they got to play Michigan at home?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So they lose to Michigan at home.
I don't know if they lose to Michigan at home. I think Michigan is going to squeak it out. All right. But then I think Texas is going to run the table.
Really?
Yes.
Oh.
I think Michigan only wins because of that home field advantage at the Big House. I think they're going to squeak it out. I think they're going to get a couple of calls. I think it'll be a controversial game. We'll see how it ends up. But I think Texas is going to be right there, and then I think Texas turns on the jet stream after that.
Okay.
I also look, if I had to pick a second, I would say that the one that I'm most worried about would be Cam Ward from Miami, because if Miami can beat Clemson and get in there, Cam Ward's going to have some sick numbers.
I think it's Carson Beck, or I just don't know about Oregon coming into the Big Ten. I have a feeling that it's going to turn out bad for them. So
all right,
I see them losing more than 3 games.
And I'll give you one more if you're betting on the odds. If you're one of these long odds players that likes to have a futures bet that's heavy, Oklahoma State, again, with that weak schedule, they've got a running back named Ollie Gordon. I think he's Ollie Gordon III, and he could break some records running the football. In that conference with some weak rush defenses. He might put up some gaudy numbers too. So now we move on to the greatest Heisman Trophy winners of all time. And this is kind of one of my favorites because you played with one of them in Barry Sanders, the great Oklahoma State running back who famously, Barry Switzer said, and I quote, coming into the halftime locker room, gentlemen, please do not hurt Thurman Thomas because we don't want to see Barry Sanders. Thurman Thomas and Barry Sanders were in the same backfield at Oklahoma State, and Switzer made a point to tell his defense not to hurt Thurman because they don't want to see Barry. But Barry Sanders is one of our local favorites, certainly one of mine. I mentioned Joe Burrow and the 2019 LSU team that I just think is one of the class acts in the history of college football. When you look back at college football players and their careers, who just sets the bar for you?
Definitely Barry. Definitely Barry. He was amazing, just a even better person than he was a player. You know, I was a little disappointed that he fell asleep during the Heisman ceremony. I think he was in Japan or something, right? And he was on video in the special that I watched. Yeah. I played with Gino Torretta. He won the Heisman, right?
I think Gino did win the Heisman.
Gino did win the Heisman.
1992.
Yeah, he won the Heisman. I played with Gino.
That was the one I was talking about, Miami. You know, sometimes they just give it to the best player or the quarterback of the best team.
That's what I mean. That's why I said it's got to come from the top 4 or 5 teams. Every year, the person that, unless they do something stupid and just throw for...
The old ball coach had Danny Werfel wearing the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of them. Matt Leinart didn't have much of a pro career, but that was a hell of a football team.
Reggie Bush and I mean, look how many quarterbacks. You're telling me that it's got to be a quarterback?
Yeah, you can't run the breakdown of these though when you look at the Heisman Trophy and not mention Archie Griffin in Ohio State. I know that a lot of people up here, the team up north. and the team across the southern border, the Toledo line, gets a lot of grief from Michigan fans. But Archie Griffin wins back-to-back Heisman trophies. I mean, it's hard to put anybody else in a framework when it's only happened once.
Well, it's the same thing with winning a national championship, right? If you've got a great team and a great quarterback, but how many guys win 2 national championships? Not many.
Not many, especially in today's era where the shifting tide happens so quick. And there's a lot of busts too, right? I mean, like, we look at Jameis Winston. I mean, he's still fighting through an NFL career.
Look at Robert Griffin. I mean, what'd he play? 5-6 years, maybe? Maybe not even that.
Yeah, I mean, some of these guys are still writing their script. Chris Winkie.
Ron Dane, I think he might have played in a couple seasons.
Yeah, always struggled with the weight problems.
Yeah.
And Chris Winkie never, the great Florida State quarterback.
Some people's games just don't equate to NFL football. It's, in some ways, a little bit of a different sport than college. It just is.
Which of those was most shocking to you? That were Heisman or Heisman caliber and then just couldn't translate it?
Well, the number 1 pick, the guy from LSU, what was his name?
Jamarcus Russell.
Jamarcus Russell is a great example. He got that money and just lost his mind. Just put on 30 pounds, showed up to practice late, got cut, got signed back, got cut again.
The 2 that I know, Chuck Long didn't win the Heisman Trophy, but Chuck Long, I just thought he was a slam dunk. He came to Detroit, couldn't figure it out. And then Sam Bradford. Sam Bradford had an okay pro career, but I thought Sam Bradford, after winning the Heisman Trophy at Oklahoma, he just seemed to have all of the tools that an NFL quarterback needs.
He had the looks, right? He looked right.
He just looked right.
Yeah. Sometimes games don't equate. They just don't transfer. I mean, just because you play at Michigan in the Big Ten and you throw 80-yard touchdowns, you say to yourself, well, that's for sure he's going to be successful in the NFL. And that's not the case.
No. Wasn't the case for Rashaan Salam.
No.
Right? Wasn't the case for Andre Ware.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, exactly.
We had 2 of them in Detroit. You kind of scratch your head. I think the most dominant performance for me as a college football fan, end to end, I mentioned Joe Burrow, but Joe Burrow had a lot of people around him. The one that just individually, to me, put a team and a program on their shoulders. I know a lot of people don't like this guy, but I don't think you can argue with what he did in a singular college football season, was Cam Newton at Auburn. I mean, other than Bo Jackson on the Auburn radar, right, there was nobody in that era. Can you think of another player on that Auburn team?
No.
No. I mean, that was a great team, right? He wins the 2010 Heisman.
And what's sad, too, is he left Florida. He left, and then he went to a 1AA program. Where did he go?
Yeah, had to do
where did he go?
I think he had a junior college kind of...
and just killed it.
Yeah.
Killed it.
And then jumped back.
And then came back and killed it again. Sometimes it's just the way the world works. Sometimes you could be the best player in the world, but the opportunity doesn't come together for you and meet your skill set. Same in business.
And again, if you're just trying to look at the greatest performances for a season, right? We just saw a Michigan team that was very well balanced, right? Some teams do it that way. The Bear Bryant era of Alabama, the Bud Wilkinson and Barry Switzer Oklahoma teams. But then there's other teams that just have rock stars, right?
Miami.
A lot of rock stars in Miami.
A lot of rock stars. I haven't looked, but I bet on the team that Benny Blades was on, I think they had 8 to 10 Pro Bowlers in the NFL.
And then Coker's team later on had 17 17 draft picks. I mean,
and how many made the Pro? Yeah, then you got to look at how many made the Pro Bowl, actually made the teams. But I'm sure most of them did.
Yeah.
But it's amazing.
When you focus it down, who had the most outstanding season in a college football season? Who stands out to you where you say that season was the masterpiece?
When I look at it, Reggie Bush. I thought he was that good. He was that much of a game changer. The long runs, the slick cutbacks, right? making plays when there isn't one, returning punts, and he was in L.A., right? That's got a big TV following and a big following online. I think Reggie Bush.
Charles Woodson wins it as a defensive player.
Yeah, and played in the NFL for 15 years. And
Doug Flutie makes the crazy Boston College bomb to beat Miami, ends his career in an epic fashion. There are some names. I mean,
Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker was probably one of the best running backs I've ever seen. Billy Sims is on there. Tony Dorsett.
The most physically destroying Earl Campbell, the Tyler Rose.
Yeah.
If you want to go back in time, I mean, some of these guys you just can't believe they won Heisman trophies. It's hard to believe that Eric Crouch won a Heisman trophy. You forget that Mark Ingram won a Heisman trophy.
So I don't remember this, but I bet Eric Crouch was on an undefeated team.
Oh yeah, that's the Nebraska. That's Tom Osborne's final stand.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, I guess sometimes it's more important to be the leader of a team that's one of the top 3 or 4. Obviously, it is. I mean, look at the people that have won.
And I think the big ones are going to lead us into, the most recent ones are going to lead us into this season's NFL tilt. We're going to see Jaden Daniels. We're going to see Caleb Williams. We're going to see Bryce Young. We're going to see Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson. You run back. The Heisman trophies, it's all quarterbacks. Do you think, my last question of this segment, do you think a wide receiver finally finds a way? Because we have to go all the way back to when they called them split ends.
Yeah.
Right? To find a guy who won the Heisman Trophy who was a receiver. Do you think a wide receiver is going to find a way? Or can wide receivers just be taken out of a game too easily by a defense?
I think they can be taken out of a game too easily by a defense, but my answer is no until it's yes. When you get somebody that's a complete freak that nobody can cover, that they double team all, it'd have to be somebody that they double teamed every game, and he still made the catches that he needed to make.
Yeah,
that's it. I mean, he has to be that good, and there's very few people. Calvin Johnson was one of those, but it'd have to be somebody like that you couldn't cover even if you double team. And even Calvin Johnson, when he played, he didn't even get up on the podium, and he was one of the best players to ever play in college. So I don't think so. I think you got to be a quarterback.
It's going to have to be a quarterback or a running back.
Running back
breaks the record by a long shot.
Or some amazing defensive tackle or a crazy Bosworth, linebacker.
So Heisman Trophy, I'm delivering the Heisman Trophy to the Ewers residents in Austin, Texas. You're giving it to Dylan Gabriel?
No,
Carson Beck.
Carson Beck
in Athens, Georgia.
Yeah.
And then my all-time great Heisman Trophy winner in the history of the trophy itself, I'm giving it to Cam Newton.
I'm giving it to Barry.
And you're giving it to Barry Sanders.
Got to give it to Barry.
Worthy subjects indeed. If all of our audience is interested in learning more, they can follow us on any of the major platforms. The links and information are in the show notes of this episode. We are, once again, in a world of well-produced, mediocrely researched, and expertly presented episodes here at GoQuest. We want you to go to GoQuest.com, seek us out, get into the mix, and we will miss you until next time.
Until next time.
Gurgle, gurgle, beer man.